Okay, we'll start with this. A bit of news that caught me by surprise. Sandy Ryan, world champion, splits from longtime coach Clifton Mitchell. A decision that I think is being made in haste because you have to ask yourself, if the right woman would have won the fight, would this be the case? Would this be the situation? Clifton Mitchell's last fight in Ryan's corner was her draw with Jessica McCaskill in September's unification bout. He has been like a father figure to me, Ryan told BBC East Midlands today. Ryan's desire to base her training in Portugal and America prompted the split. It's a decision that Clifton understands because he feels it's the best way for me to further my career, she added. Mitchell, who runs the One Nation boxing gym in Derby, said his business commitments meant he could not devote the time Ryan needed when training overseas. There may have been some desire to train in Portugal and train in America ahead of the Jessica McCaskill fight. That might have been there, but I feel that had Sandy won it, had the right woman won the fight, perhaps she wouldn't have split with Clifton Mitchell on the predication of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You don't argue with results.
The outcome of that fight wasn't the right one. That wasn't the right result. Most people that saw that fight saw Sandy win it.
I'm sad to part ways, but this is her career, and I understand she has to do what is best for her, said Mitchell. I've got nothing but love for her. Ryan won Commonwealth Games gold and World Championship silver medals as an amateur under Mitchell's tutelage. She turned professional in 2021 after missing out on the Tokyo Olympic Games and captured the WBO welterweight title in April of 2023 after just 7 fights in the paid ranks. Ryan has yet to announce who she will now work with. And once again, I believe that it's a decision made in haste because I don't think Sandy would have made the decision to split from Clifton Mitchell if she would have got the decision, and by all rights, she should have. Most people had her winning that fight. She likely feels powerless in this situation, that she did everything she had to do in camp in preparation for the fight, and in the fight, she may have felt that she won it, yet somehow it still got away from her. So she's grasping onto what she can do and what she can control. She can't control what the judges think, but she can control where she trains
and who trains her, though I don't think that's the solution to this problem.
I feel this is more about ineptitude. The ineptitude of the judges scoring the fight, and how while most spectators had Sandy winning the fight and winning the fight wide, they inexplicably had it scored a draw. So how does not training with Clifton Mitchell remedy that? In what way does that remedy that situation?
It really doesn't when you think about it.
Feeling so inclined to go that extra mile and shed her old skin. Of course, Sandy Ryan could grow even further under a new trainer. The thing is, there was nothing wrong with the old one, and the old trainer ain't the reason you ain't get the decision. Inept judges are the reason you didn't get the decision. Where does Sandy Ryan go from here? She wants to base her training out of Portugal and America. We saw noticeable changes in amateur standout Ramla Ali when she decided to venture to America to train here under Manny Robles, and for what it's worth, I think she's turned out all right, even though she's coming off a loss to Alejandra Guzman, who she will be having a rematch with very soon. I'm just saying that coming to America, it's not a bad idea. It could be good. I just think it's unfortunate that Sandy and Clifton Mitchell are parting ways under these circumstances, because I'm convinced if Sandy would have got the decision, this wouldn't be happening. If Sandy would have got the decision, we wouldn't be here now. If it ain't broke, you don't fix it.
And the right woman not winning the fight creates doubt. I believe it's created doubt in Sandy Ryan's own mind. Most people saw her win that fight. I saw her winning that fight.
In her own mind, though, she maybe feels she's not doing enough, so she means to change her decorum, and it just is what it is. In men's super middleweight news, an update on a story that we talked about late yesterday, that Canelo Alvarez's next 2 fights will be shown on the Showtime platform, in spite of Showtime leaving the sport of boxing after this year. According to veteran boxing scribe Dan Rafael, per a Showtime spokesperson, there are no plans for any Showtime pay-per-views of any kind in 2024. Thus, based on this, if Canelo Alvarez plans on boxing Jaime Munguia and David Benavidez thereafter, it must be someplace else. It must be on another platform, which would make sense when you think about it. If Showtime is leaving the sport of boxing this year, why would they still be broadcasting Canelo Alvarez fights next year? It doesn't make a lot of sense, and what makes more sense is that now that Al is in the market for a new broadcast partner, he would use those two Canelo Alvarez fights to enter into some new kind of deal, even if it's just a distribution deal. It wouldn't make sense for Showtime to still be showing boxing matches when they're essentially shutting down their sports department. Rick Glacier stated, "From my entertainment attorney friend that gives me those spot-on pay-per-view numbers since 2004, the entire United States TV industry knows Al Haymon and PBC are soiled brands, and sliding yearly. Haymon no longer will get a TV or streaming deal that actually pays a guarantee. He may get a distribution deal with no financial guarantees, but that's an at-best scenario." There you have it. Could this be the end of PBC as we know it?
If they can't get a new broadcast partner, if they can't get someone to give them an annual budget to stage fights throughout the calendar year.
What is not a celebration of their failures so much as an I told you so, that I told you it's not all sunshine and rainbows over there, that the numbers they're putting up based on what a platform would want, it's just not sustainable, and most of Al Haymon's reputation as this guru, as this wizard, stems from the success
Floyd.
with a fighter that he didn't even groom.
Mayweather.
What is thought of Al Haymon is all predicated on the success that he had alongside Floyd Mayweather, who he didn't groom, who he didn't build, who he himself did not develop into a world-class boxer, a pound-for-pound talent. By the time that Al comes into the picture, Floyd Mayweather is already a finished product. And so much of what people think of Al is based on Floyd and Floyd's success, when Al didn't groom Floyd.
What is known about Al is that he has a knack, a talent. He's very good at fucking off other people's money. Lots of other people's money. That you didn't duplicate the success you had with Floyd with anybody else because you didn't build him to begin with.
You know, I remember when DAZN first debuted in America, and their initial losses in trying to break into this market, calculated losses that were anticipated, were expected, not even exclusive to the sport of boxing, but acquiring sports acquisitions, sports rights in other countries. It was expensive at the start, but there were a lot of people in the sport of boxing who were telling you that it is Eddie Hearn that fucked off all that money.
Saying things like he blew over $1 billion on boxing. You think he blew off over $1 billion on boxing? What the fuck, are you, a moron?
Even after DAZN told you what they spent all that money on, there was still people here stateside, people in the sport of boxing, accusing Eddie of fucking off all that money. Eddie Hearn, who says broadcasters can't continually pay money for fights that don't deliver.
He's right.
To that, Hall of Fame promoter Lou Dibella responded by saying, "This is rich." While he's right, he had unfettered years of near exclusivity, spending hundreds of millions of other people's money as he pleased. He made the fights, shaking my fucking head.
What the fuck is Lou talking about? He tried to work with you people. He tried to make the fight between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder.
Tried to make the unification match between then middleweight champions Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade. Tried to make the unification match between then super featherweight champions Tevin Farmer and Gervonta Davis. And it was your colleagues, your buddies at the PBC that didn't want to work with him. If anyone has been breeding division in the sport of boxing, it's been you guys, not Eddie. But Lou Dibella continued, not with the propagandist tone of BoxingScene.com's article, ignoring the role of exclusive platform contracts, like Eddie's, have had in the weakening fight quality and exacerbating the decline of boxing. But, substantively, I agree with Eddie. Weak products hurting a declining sport. Well, let's recap. Let's look at it.
Look.
Eddie's got a broadcast partner. Eddie's got a broadcast deal. And Eddie's company, Matchroom, is in the plus. They're in the black, not the red.
When Matchroom's deal with Sky Sports was up over a year ago, it's not like what we're seeing with Showtime and PBC. No, Sky wanted Matchroom to stay. Sky wanted Matchroom to renew and stay on their platform, whereas Showtime gave the PBC the boot.
So while we're talking about exclusivity hurting the sport of boxing, those kinds of deal structures, a weak product that's hurting a declining sport, that actually has more to do with Al Heyman's PBC and less to do with Eddie Hearns' Matchroom. Matchroom, quite literally, has grown as a company bigger than it ever was, bigger than when his father was in charge, his father Barry.
Ask a Brit. Ask one who knows.
Matchroom as a company has only grown. It's grown bigger on Eddie Hearns' watch, expanding outside of just the United Kingdom to the United States, to Australia, to Mexico.
Has the PBC grown over time like that? Has the PBC expanded its area of operations, or is it shrinking?
Lou Dibella wants to sit on a high horse prattling on about how Eddie Hearn fucked off other people's money. If anybody fucked off other people's money, it's Al Heyman. If anybody has hurt the sport of boxing with anything they did, it's Al Heyman. He has made the sport of boxing an unattractive investment to broadcasters, bouncing from network to network with his inferior product.
You want to talk about fucking off other people's money, blowing other people's money? That's what Al Heyman did with Waddle and Reed's money, burning those investors and having absolutely nothing to show for it.
What the fuck did you do? You blew $500 million on Danny Garcia fights, Keith Thurman fights. If Lou Dibella wants to address what's wrong, what's really wrong with the current model, and what's really wrong with the sport of boxing, the business of boxing here today, he shouldn't be talking about Eddie. He should be talking about Al.
None of these guys want to, though. Not Lou Dibella, not Dan Rafael. None of these guys want to call a spade a spade. That Al Heyman very much hurt the business, the sport of boxing in America.
You want to sit there belly aching about things Eddie Hearn said? Think about what Al Heyman has done to boxing in America.
I think that's a lot of people's problem in boxing. They don't want to address the elephant in the room. Who's really responsible for boxing's decline in this country?
Well, you cut off your nose to spite your face, deflecting from what the real problem is. Using Showtime's demise, Showtime Boxing's demise, as an example of what not to do, in tandem with what Eddie Hearn is talking about, that broadcasters can't continually pay money for fights that don't deliver, that directly speaks to Showtime Boxing's problem. When you put on a David Benavidez versus Ronald Ellis fight, or a David Benavidez versus Kyron Davis, a Romer Angulo, all of that costs money. There's no such thing as a free lunch. You put on 3 fights that nobody gives a rat's furry fucking ass about, and in the end, what did you get out of it? What did you get? You got kicked the fuck out of boxing. That's what you got.
The money you spend to put Gervonta Davis in the ring with guys like Leo Santa Cruz and Isaac Cruz, Hector Garcia, Rolly Romero.
That money comes from Showtime. That money comes from Showtime in the form of an annual budget so that you can stage fights throughout the calendar year. And the expectation is that the fights you put on will draw eyes and sustain viewership to their platform. But you're not doing that when you're putting it behind a paywall and it only brings in 200 and 225,000 buys.
That's nothing. And I told you that was nothing. And the decision to do that, well, it couldn't have been the right one because now Showtime is out of boxing and Stephan is out of a job.
So what should they have done? Well, Eddie Hearn says broadcasters can't continually pay money for fights that don't deliver. How do you get that kind of matchmaking to deliver? How do you get something out of that? You would have, ideally, put that on the regular schedule, on regular Showtime, not pay-per-view, and that would have drawn more eyes to the platform on the predication that it wouldn't have costed consumers an arm and a leg to watch those fights, that they would have been more accessible, and that would have shown up in the numbers, which in turn may have made Showtime Boxing seem a worthwhile investment to the people at Showtime and their higher-ups at Paramount. But the way you played it, they weren't getting much out of the money they were spending on boxing anyway, so they decided to scrap it. The hope is that when you do these fights over time, the fighter develops value over time. And when you think about that arena, in that realm, a Lee Wood in Nottingham or a Josh Warrington in Leeds retains more value in those domestic markets than, say, the Charlo brothers in America.
It sounds crazy, I know, but if you don't believe me, look around. Look at the size of the crowds that show up for their fights versus the size of the crowds that show up for Charlo brother fights, the ones that don't involve a Canelo.
That an unbeaten up-and-comer like a Johnny Fisher is a bigger ticket seller, has more marquee value already in just a few fights than a Frank Martin, who's got by and large more pro experience than Johnny does. These are the shortcomings that people in the American media and in the American boxing scene always fail to address. That Al Haymon is not the guru he's made out to be, because there are a few Brits over there that can outsell his fighters in their markets.
You're burning money. You're overspending to satisfy the financial demands of fighters who want money they're not even good for.
What do you think this is? I'll tell you what it is. It's a business, and you don't set your own price. The market dictates the price. The market dictates what your fights are worth, not you and your financial demands. Any Joe Blow with boxing gloves on will tell you that he thinks he belongs on pay-per-view, when in reality, pay-per-view isn't for most fighters. Pay-per-view isn't for most fights, and the idea that any two halfway decent fighters or every halfway decent fight needs to be marinated over 3 and 4 and 5 years is ridiculous. That's a big part of the reason Showtime ended up leaving the sport of boxing, because Al Haymon is a hack with no new ideas. He's been trying to duplicate the success of Floyd Mayweather in the Maypac fight, not realizing everybody ain't Floyd Mayweather. You can't do that with every single fight and every single fighter.
All the while, you're wasting all that time, and you're wasting all that money, and you're not delivering metrics to your broadcast partner you think you can ignore. Your broadcast partner.
Quite literally, where the money to pay for all of this is coming from. Al Haymon has a knack for fucking off other people's money and blowing budgets. Al has already burned a lot of bridges, and if he can't get a broadcast partner to give him an annual budget or a multi-year deal, he will then be reduced to a booking agent who has to outsource his fighters to whoever can use them, because he himself doesn't have a platform for them to fight on.
The ones that actually stay with him.
Though I don't see why they would if he doesn't have network money to pay them or a network for them to fight on. We'll see what happens.